In this edition of Garden Talk with the Tulsa County Master Gardeners, we'll talk about crepe myrtle bark scale, a pest that's really come on strong in our area. Looking for a plant for a shady area that could get up to 10 feet tall? We may just have what you're looking for. We'll also talk about what you should be doing in your garden right now, as well as answer some of the questions from our diagnostic center. Welcome to Garden Talk. Welcome to the Tulsa Master Gardeners podcast. We call it Garden Talk. This is the maiden voyage, episode 1. I'm sure it'll go down in the history of podcasts as just being the most awesome thing we've ever done. But my name is Tom Ingram. I'm a Master Gardener for several years. I'm here with Brian Jervis.
And Brian Jervis, I'm excited about being here myself. So it's kind of going to be kind of fun, I think. We've got a lot of good things planned with this podcast. It's gardening, so you can talk about a lot of different things. We're going to try to keep it to about 5 subjects and try to keep it as quick as we can, but enjoyable. So
it's seasonal. Well, like what you should be doing in your garden now. What's a problem that we got coming in? We're seeing it in our diagnostic center. People calling in or asking questions. So, we'll try and bring you some information that's good right now and not maybe good next year, but maybe some of that as well. So welcome. We're glad you're here. And we'll just get started. What do you say?
It'll be fun. I'm ready.
All right. Well, the first topic we're talking about is our pest of the week. This pest, I don't know how many calls and things we get about this particular pest, but this is predominant. This is it's crepe myrtle bark scale, right?
Crepe myrtle bark. We love our crepe myrtles here in
Yes,
Tulsa, and most southern states, and this area of the country has crepe myrtles. Right now during the summertime, it's one of our main blooming flower plants.
And they're beautiful.
They're awesome. Different colors, different shapes, different sizes.
Right.
But we've got what we're calling a crepe myrtle bark scale that's been attacking it.
Right.
Yeah, so on the picture here, good photo we've got. Basically, this is pretty common of what we're seeing. The main thing homeowners are going to see, they're going to see this black sooty mold. And that sooty mold we'll get into later, but what that's caused by is by this actual scale. It's a felt scale, Tom, kind of different than a lot of our hard scales or our clam type shell scales that we have. Control's similar, but it's called a felt scale.
Well, a felt scale, does that have to do, I've heard you, in the diagnostic process, you can actually squish them, and if it comes out pink, that's a kind of a confirmation that this is.
It is. If you go to the next slide, you can actually see the little critter with a microscope, and under each one of those white cottony coverings are a lot of little babies out there. So each one of these, a lot of babies. So they lay their eggs. Those babies grow underneath that protection of that felt, and then they come out to feed. So if you go back, I hate to keep going back on you, but so you see the white covering. Inside that's that pink goo that you was talking about. Those pink insects.
The babies.
Yeah.
So we're looking there and we see, a couple of hundred scales, but inside each of those scales there's more
little babies that are continuing their life.
1,000 or more.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
So and they're all protected. Each one of those, they're feeding. As a lot of sucking insects, as they take in juices, they've got to excrete some. So they excrete a product called honeydew. It's a sugary substance that falls off. You may have seen it on your cars when you park underneath trees. You get kind of sticky stuff.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, kind of nasty. So what's happened on this leaf, that sugary substance fell on that leaf.
Right.
And then a sooty mold, a mold
I think we've
fungus.
got a better picture of that mold.
Yeah, so a mold has attacked that sugary substance, causing it black.
Yeah, that doesn't look very healthy.
It doesn't. It's not too bad on it,
right.
Just really bad on appearances. But the black is the telltale sign, and that's what we're going to start seeing a lot coming up later on this fall.
So the black mold, I've heard it attracts ants. Do ants get in there with the honeydew? They like the honeydew as well?
It is. Another sign that you may have a scale insect, and crepe myrtle bark scale will fit into that category, is a lot of ants crawling around the trunk.
Right.
Those ants are harvesting that honeydew.
Right.
They're eating that sugar. So it's kind of a cycle there where they're feeding on the honeydew, taking it back to their nest, feeding their babies. But but the main thing is if you see a lot of ants, you probably got some scale insects on.
So it's good for the ants, but it's bad for our crepe myrtles.
Not so good on our crepe myrtles. As this goes, you'll get this particular one's probably 6 months infested, maybe a year infested.
Right.
You start seeing that black all over the trunk, not just on the leaves. It's really easy to see in the wintertime once the leaves fall off is that black sooty mold.
Right. Or there's another picture. You can see it on the like the bark of the tree that's not covered up by the leaves as it drifts down.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was talking about. A winter shot where we don't have leaves. We see a lot of black on there. So bad insect. Again, I think about my best estimate is about half of our crepe myrtles that we have in town are affected with crepe myrtle bark scale of some sort.
Well, I know just driving around town, sometimes you'll notice outside of a housing development or something, they have a whole row of crepe myrtles down there, and you look, and they all
look black.
They all are black,
Yeah,
that's just going to spread. That's kind of an incubator to spread to other crepe myrtles.
That's right, and they're not moving much in the wintertime. I mean, we get some warm days that they may feed a little bit. But for the most part, they're kind of dormant. I don't like to use that word, but they're kind of dormant a little bit in the wintertime. Spring times when they really start, just like everything else growing outside, they'll really start activating essentially. They'll come out of that shell, start crawling around, start finding another place to mate and start a new life cycle essentially in the spring.
Well, I know myself, my neighbors headed across the street from our house, and so I kept watch. And then sure enough, one day I went out there and saw it, but it was just confined to one branch.
Yeah.
So that's like an easy removal.
Yep.
Get rid of that branch, and it was good to go. But where did this come from?
It's kind of an odd deal. It hadn't been around that long. I think 2004 we found it in Dallas. So blame it on Texas.
Well,
blame it on Texas.
Absolutely.
So yeah, 2004 we had a landscaper that kind of came across of it, and then we got the Texas A&M involved and kind of got some studies done, and it's another type of scale that has just shown up. It actually come from China, is where they think they traced it back to.
All right. Well, we've got a map here that kind of shows the distribution here in the United States. And you're right, it is kind of confined to this southern portion of the United States, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas.
The green counties are the one that have been confirmed, but there's a lot more I know out there that we just haven't confirmed. I mean, this one is July 2nd of this year in 19. But it's pretty solid, and it's a big problem we have.
Right. So if you've got it, what do you do about it?
So now the big question is how do you control it?
That's
I mean, a lot of the times it's kind of similar to what our scale control is going to be, where we use dormant oil in the wintertime. Dormant oil is a thick oil that covers and coats that particular felt or that insect, suffocating them. So in theory, sounds good, but man, you saw in those pictures how many they are. It really takes some diligence to get them fully coated. It's not like they're going to walk through an insecticide, take that up, and kill them. You've got to get it on them, and it's got to coat them enough to suffocate them.
Well, and they call it dormant oil because it's thicker, and you only want to use it on dormant plants.
That's correct.
Because otherwise it will smother them or damage the leaves. You wouldn't want to spray this dormant oil on a plant that's got leaves.
That's right. Leaves that are out there, it's designed to coat and suffocate. So we've got some summer oil that's a little thinner oil, but it's not as effective. It just needs to be covered in the wintertime with that dormant thick type oil.
Right. Well, I've also heard one of the recommendations is you can grab it. You can get the branch, depending on the outbreak, how much you have, you can get a stiff brush and a bucket of soapy water and get out there and scrub them off physically. But, I mean, that's going to get pretty tedious pretty fast. And if you've got a crepe myrtle that's taller than you are, which most of them are, that doesn't seem like a good plan A.
I've got kids at home and busy in the evenings, and I don't feel like going out and scrubbing my crepe myrtle too much.
No, I know when I was reading that, it's like, well, okay, I'm not going to do that. Well, let's see what plan B is.
Some of you crazy gardeners could probably do that and spend about an hour or two, but that's okay. I mean, to one is each own, or whatever they say. But it can be done. Actually, mechanically removing with a scrubby brush. How about that? A brush that scrubs that off.
A stiff brush.
Yeah. And it can work. I like the dormant oil. I like that in wintertime when we lose our leaves. I would like to see that done about every month.
In the winter?
In the winter, probably starting December, January, and February, and even March. So that's 3 or 4 times, 3 or 4 applications, making sure that you're going to get it good and covered. So that's one option that we have is kind of the dormant oil suffocation.
Is there a chemical option for
there are. We need to kind of wait until, you remember I mentioned about when they were crawling in the springtime, they tend to get outside that felt, and when they start doing that, we can put a contact insecticide on at that point. Bifenthrin Bifenthrin is one that tends to work pretty good. It's fairly safe and it's pretty targeted. So those soft-bodied scales, when they get out and start crawling, we give bifenthrin or any other type of landscape insecticide. That should, since they're soft-bodied, should control them pretty easily.
So bifenthrin that you're mentioning there, that's the actual name of the ingredient, not the product. You'd have to go to the store and look for a product that had that as an ingredient.
Correct.
Right?
So yeah, you're going to have to look at the fine print and find bifenthrin as an active ingredient.
Take your magnifying glass.
Yeah,
and
but no, I mean, I did say fairly easy once they get to crawling. There's nothing easy about controlling these guys.
Right.
They're not all going to come out of that shell at the same time. Right. So you're going to have some's going to come out now, then another couple weeks, then a couple weeks. So it's going to be kind of a continued process. Right. But we can use that bifenthrin or insecticide, that contact insecticide, throughout the season as we see the crawlers.
Right. Well, one thing we know for sure is they're everywhere. You can just drive around town and see them. The parks and yards, and it's almost unusual to see one that if you don't see
doesn't
it,
have it. If
you don't see it now, you likely will see it because it's on the move. And
that's exactly right.
It's pretty robust.
There's been some talk also about systemic insecticides. Systemic insecticides usually work pretty good. Some of the issues that we're having with some systemics is that we don't know if it's going to transfer into our pollinators to our pollen. So for right now, Oklahoma, we're not recommending systemics for controlling scale, these crepe myrtle bark scale. There may be some safer alternatives that come out, or some alternatives that aren't quite gonna get into the pollen.
That's a negative effect.
That's kind of the negative effect.
Right.
Those products are labeled for scale, but for right now, Oklahoma State University is not recommending systemics.
Right. And when you say systemic is like you buy a concentrate, mix it up in a bucket for the recommendations, and then you pour it around the base of the plant or shrub, and it gets absorbed up into it. So it would essentially be killing them from the inside. They're protected in that shell.
That's correct.
But then they're not protected when they're
when they suck the
juice, and the juice carries the pesticide.
That's
and
correct.
Get them.
That's correct.
But then it'll also go up into the flowers and
that's correct.
Perhaps
that's correct.
So
like holly, holly gets some scale, armored scale.
Right.
There's not a lot of flowers on the holly bush essentially. Right. So a systemic would work pretty well on that because we're not too worried about transferring that systemic insecticide to our pollinators or to our bees. So hollies and other type of landscape plants, that systemic can work pretty well on that. Just be careful and be aware that if they are flowering and we have treated them with some systemic, there could be a chance that we transfer that through the pollen.
Right. Well, that sounds good.
Awesome. Good luck with that one. That's a hard one. We'll get some control of it. We've just got to be educated about it, know what to do, and timing is everything.
You have to know which tool to pull out of the toolbox.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
So next up, we're going to be talking about the plant of the week. And it'll be trying to feature a different plant every podcast. And we're coming up in the fall here, and fall is the best time to plant trees and shrubs. Ironically, maybe not the first choice, but it is the best time to plant trees and shrubs. So this week, we're going to be recommending or suggesting you think about a cuba. A cuba is actually an evergreen year-round, and it actually likes shade, and it will enjoy a shady spot, which is unusual for a shrub. A lot of us have shade, and we're like, what do I do?
What do I do with this?
But this thing, this is actually a variegated version here called golden dust, but there's different cultivars that you can get, and these things will get like almost 10 feet tall and 4 or 5 feet wide, so you can keep it trimmed down small as a smaller shrub, or it can get big, but it's going to thrive in shade or part sun and not do well in full sun. So that's a great choice if you got an area where you want nice, and it's kind of tropical.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I mean, it brings some color down underneath those shades where we usually don't have anything. Go to your favorite nursery and check them out, see what they've got. I believe there's different sizes. There's I don't know if there's a true dwarf, but there's going to be some that get a little taller than others. Right. So yeah, this is a good shade plant, good plant that we wanted to cover. Our first plant of the week discussion that we had. So go to your nursery, look at that, check it out, and check it out
and think about it, because like we said, fall's the best time to plant trees and shrubs. Now's when we need to be thinking about it and let them get established. And maybe in another episode we'll talk about proper practices for planting
trees
and
and
the best way to do it. In
that's
fact,
correct.
we'll write that down. We'll cover that in one of our other podcasts
That's
coming
right.
up. So
That's right.
this next part we're calling Now is the Time, and it's basically we're talking about what should we be doing in our gardens and yards right now. I've got a garden, I've got a yard. What should I be doing? What should be first on my list to accomplish?
So we're coming to the end of August, 1st of September. First thing I think of it's winter pre-emergent time in our flower
always
beds.
on our minds. Pre-emergence.
Pre-emergence always in our mind.
Right.
So now's the perfect time to control those winter weeds and early spring weeds through a pre-emergent.
So pre-emergent, what do you mean? What do you mean by
So
pre-emergent?
a pre-emergent is a herbicide that's applied usually in a liquid form. So you'll spray it. Homeowners can have some other type of forms where it's granular and it's released. So that herbicide it was released, watered in, and it basically creates an invisible barrier to keep essentially weed seeds from germinating. So all those weed seeds that we got out there, that's going to stop them from germinating. It usually won't do 100%, but it'll sure do a pretty good job.
So if you stop them, the theory being you stop them from germinating, you're not going to have to get out there and pull them or spray something else on top of them. Because then they're most vulnerable when they're just tiny little seedlings. Once they get up and get growing and get bigger, they're going to be not as receptive.
Harder to control, Think of henbit. That's kind of what we're covering now. Henbit's that purple weed that we have in the wintertime, around Easter time, in the late winter, early spring. Right. So that purple weed. So what's happening with that particular weed and a lot of others out there? They're starting to germinate, coming up pretty quick. They're gonna start sprouting once this weather kind of cools off a little bit. They start germinating. So if we have a pre-emergent out there, it'll keep them from germinating. But continuing that life cycle, they'll germinate. They'll grow pretty much vegetatively, or not putting on flowers. They'll grow all winter. Right. So November, December, January, when it's not too cold, they're still growing. And then they put flowers on, and then February, March they flower. Those flowers will then produce seeds. Those seeds will fall down in the ground. They'll end up dying. The plant will end up dying. The seeds will stay there all summer, starting this process all over again this time next year.
So, you're using a pre-emergent to you're doing it before you have a problem. You may have a but if you put a pre-emergent down, you're going to minimize.
That's correct. Yeah, less plants, less problems you'll have later on.
So, Brian, you mentioned pre-emergence. There's lots of different pre-emergents out there. How do we know which pre-emergents? Are they all the same, or they got to be differences?
There are. I mean, there's actually not very many different chemicals out there. Right. There's a lot of different trade names out there, brand names. Right. So what they'll do, these companies will buy one or two of these products and post, create them based on what they, whether it's halts or whether it's preen or, just a generic crabgrass preventer. So, right. When we talk about chemical names, I'm going to use, they're going to be bigger names. Those are what you're going to have to look kind of at the fine print and kind of see that. But we've got a couple common ones. Pendimethalin is one that's it's a 3-month type pre-emergent, right. So you'll have to put it on every 3 months. That's probably our most common one. Right. But prodiamine is another one. Again, these are active ingredients. That prodiamine is one that's 6 months, so it lasts a little longer. Right. So in the springtime when we apply, instead of having to go back and apply, February and then maybe June and July, right. You can get from February possibly till August, September, to just do 2 treatments, one in the winter and one in the summer. Good. So yeah, just depends on what right. You want, what you like.
Maybe how big a problem you have.
Yeah, I mean you can back off a little. Right. Weeds in our lawn or in our flower bed, it's going to take time. There's right. Not a magic bullet that's going to take them all out quickly. Right. So you can expect 2 or 3 years in a yard that maybe is weedy, has quite a bit. So you'll have to stay on it, decrease that seed load, and should have a pretty good lawn before long.
And some of those seeds can remain dormant for a few years.
Few to 20 years.
Few to 20. Because I know we get calls from people in the diagnostic center. They're saying, "Hey, I did what you said. I used the pre-emergent, and this year I've got weeds again." Well, they could have been laying there dormant. So it's going to be a multi-year process. It's not just a one and done. This is going to be a lifestyle.
It's a constant battle. It's a constant battle. Yeah. But no, I mean, go out there and look. Your local nurseries will have good products. Whether it's a liquid spray that you pump up, mix up in a pump-up sprayer and spray the whole thing, or they've got it in a granular form that usually have it on clay or corn cobs where they've got that liquid coated onto those corn cobs, and then you'll spray that out, and then you'll spread that out or spray it out, and then water it in. Watering in's the key. That we need to go ahead and get that layer set by watering in. So a half inch, quarter of an inch, just enough to kind of wet it, and then once that layer is there, it's there. Don't dig, don't mess with it as much as possible. Kind of easy to do that in the turf, but in our flower beds, it's another challenge because we want to plant some plants in those beds. So the more we dig, the more we're going to break that layer essentially.
Right. Well, another thing you mentioned henbit earlier. A lot of our people that are all about the pollinators and providing for the bees, et cetera, they're going to leave that henbit alone in their yard, and they actually look forward to the henbit in their yard. And some of it can be really pretty, like a whole yard that's covered with those purple flowers. I mean, it depends on what school you're from. If you're the school, that's a weed, I want to get rid of it, then it's a little unsightly. But if you're from the, I don't care what it looks like, it supports our pollinators and it's good for the environment, then that's another thing. So you're all adults here, you can make your own decisions.
And choose, and I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends what you want. I mean, a football field or baseball sports field, they're not gonna want very many weeds, so they're gonna apply quite a bit. Or a homeowner that feels like attacking weeds, they're gonna not gonna be able to handle a lot of weeds either. So and then other homeowners, hey, mow it and go on with it. So, yep.
Well, another thing we got to worry about this time of year is water. Water is, I mean, we've had a lot of rain recently, but this is a little unusual for us, and it'll probably stop and we'll be hot again for a while. But
yeah, and watering, how much do I water, in our lawns that's kind of a hard question because, soil types are different. You may, even within a yard, you may have some nasty tight soil that you may not be able to get enough water down, or some sandy soil that it just goes through. So it's, just provide enough water, and, it's kind of generic, but, an inch or two for fescue, an inch for Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, maybe an inch and a half. And again, it all depends how much you want to have your yard green. On warm season,
how much you want to mow.
That's exactly right. On warm season grasses, you can usually let it dry out. It'll go yellow and brown, and then when it dries out and then we get some moisture, it'll green right back up. But on fescue, you can't quite do that. If it browns out, you're not going to be able to get it back. So it all depends on the grass type. It all depends on the soil type. But generically, we can say an inch to 2 inches for fescue, and an inch to 2 inches, a little less for Bermuda, and a little more for zoysia. But that's generically the way it is.
Well, you're saying this 1 inch and 2 inch things. A lot of times the questions we get then are like, well, how do I know how long to turn my sprinkler on? It's like, well, you're going to have to measure it, and we call that an irrigation audit, and that involves getting maybe several tuna cans or something. They all the same size, same type of receptacle. Scattering that around a zone. Put the sprinkler on for 20 minutes, and then measure and see how much water you're getting. And if you want to get an inch, and you got like a quarter of an inch, you're going to have to water 4 times as long as
more.
that just did. Or if you get an inch and a half, you're like, oh, I can back off and save some money now. So
that's correct.
It's not that hard to do, and you can check the zones, or you can just look out there, and when it starts turning brown, you need more water.
And you don't have to do that every time. Do it at the first of the season, and once you realize, hey, it takes 30 minutes to put on an inch of water, then to put on an inch of water, turn it on 30 minutes. Kind of sounds obvious, but it's true. I mean, it's pretty simple. When you say audit, you think, oh my God, I don't even want to think about that. But it's not hard. You go put a few short cans, or if you've got rain gauges, that many. Who's got 6 or 8 rain gauges in their garage? But put them out there, turn it on, and see what happens. I think you'll be all right. Your grass will tell you what it's doing.
It'll let you know.
That's right.
All right, good tips for the summer. Next, we are going to look at our questions of the week. These are questions that actually come into our diagnostic center. If you'd like to submit a question to the podcast, you can send it. We'll put the email up at the end of the show. But Monday through Friday here from 9 till 4, we've got people answering phones. Walk in, you can bring in your diagnostic questions or send an email with photos. And these questions actually came in from the emails. So first up,
you never know what you're going to get on these questions.
You never know what's going to get. One time, some guy walk in with a bugger with a snake in it and wanted to know what kind of snake it was. And it was like, no,
Snakes are, yeah, that
We're not doing
was,
snakes today.
you never know. But
Yeah.
since it's the extension office, everybody, we know it all.
We do our best.
But at least we tell them where to take those damn snakes to.
Right. So this is actually some photos that was sent in to Edward. Edward, here was Edward's questions. He says, "What is this weed, and how do I get rid of it?" I mean, that's like a generic question we hear a million times a day. What is this, and how do I get rid of it?
It is, and this particular one, it's not as important to know what kind it is. It depends. It's important to know what classification it is.
Right.
And so in weed classifications, we've got three. We've got a broadleaf weed, that the hembit we talked about earlier, a broadleaf net vein appearance, no parallel veins. So veins are going to all go different net-like patterns.
Right.
So that's broadleaf.
Right.
And they're usually a broader leaf, usually round.
That's the name, broadleaf.
Some aren't.
Right.
This particular one is a grassy weed.
Right.
So a grassy weed, kind of think of a corn plant. So you're going to have a midrib or a single midrib that helps hold those leaves up, and then the veins are going to be parallel.
Right.
So that's a grassy weed. And then we've got sedges. We'll talk on another episode, probably for an hour, on sedges. But this particular one is goosegrass.
Goosegrass.
Goosegrass. This is a perennial that comes in
with seeds.
With
seeds.
seeds. So you have two things working against you on a perennial grassy weed. You've got producing seeds, and then you've got perennial roots that never die. Seems like they never die. Right. So you've got a good root system down in there, and then you've got it producing seeds. So those two things make it pretty difficult for us to control grassy weeds. This one's goosegrass. A couple others in this same family is dallisgrass. Right. Dallas is a bad one. Dallas is, in my opinion, worse than crabgrass. Crabgrass is probably our most, we say crabgrass, that's, we've got weeds, we got crabgrass. Right. Or we talked about pre-emergent, you'll see crabgrass control, because people recognize crabgrass. But crabgrass is an annual. It's pretty easy to control because it doesn't have as big a root system as these perennial grassy weeds. But they are, again, a challenge. So we'll see what we can talk about on them.
Well, and just based on what you're saying, it's perennial and it puts out seeds. So like we were just talking about using pre-emergents. Well, the pre-emergent is going to help beat down the seeds, but it's not going to do anything to this plant.
It won't do anything on the roots.
So what do you do? What's...
So there's a couple options. Probably the best option, and what even golf courses do on goosegrass, is have kind of a picking day where they go out and get on their hands and knees and they pick them up.
That sounds fun.
Woo, it is. And getting in 90-degree weather on your hands and knees, and they mostly do that on their greens where you need a good surface, and chemicals going to deter things. So popping them up's probably going to be your most effective way. It's going to be hell, but it's going to be your most effective way.
Right. And is there a chemicals?
So a couple other chemicals.
For those of us that don't want to spend a day digging them up.
Some of you that have been around gardening for a while and recognize MSMA. MSMA is a product, a herbicide that works pretty well, but we don't have it available anymore. We can use up what we have, but for our home lawns, we can't use it. So we need to use it. We can use it if we have it already. We just can't purchase it.
Is it a commercial product, or it's just gone?
It's available for certain, for like cotton fields and then right-of-ways. Right. But for homeowners, you cannot buy a new product. If you got it on your shelves, you can use it up. Right. So that product probably is out. Right. Another product, here we go on these big words, quinclorac.
Quinclorac, write this down. No.
Quinclorac. Quinclorac is our kind of a replacement for MSMA. Right. And it's not going to work as good, but it is going to selectively kill grassy weeds out of our lawn, essentially.
Right. Well, I know myself, you go shopping for some of this stuff maybe, and it seems like they're trying to make just like an all-in-one. It's like grassy weeds,
broadleaf weeds,
all in
one spray and done.
And if you look, and so there's like 4 or 5 ingredients, but as I remember, quinclorac is one of those. If it's saying grassy weeds,
yeah,
that's
what it's going to have in it. And you can find, it's a little harder to find on its own, but you can. But most of the times you're going to find it in a mixture, kind of an all-in-one with a broadleaf weed killer, a couple of those, and then quinclorac. Right. Trick on it: you've got to apply it, and then you've got to apply it again 14 days later. Right. So the first time it's pulling it up into the roots slowly, it's going to yellow it. The second application, 14 days later, it's going to yellow it even more, and it may take a third application of that to really get it under control. So for those of you gardeners that don't have the patience, it's probably going to be easier to pull it by hand than it is spray.
Well, and just to manage your expectations, that again, this is not a you're going to spray it and then you're done, and it's all. This is going to be a process.
Yeah. So another option is a non-selective contact herbicide. Boy, those are big words. Non-selective contact herbicide. Right. So those products like glyphosate or Roundup, where we're going to go and kill everything where we spray that. Unfortunately, it's going to kill everything. It's going to make a little crater, but it's going to get rid of those perennial weeds, including our turf that's there too. So if we can kind of get by with those dead spots in our lawn, that's a good way to do it. But hopefully our grass is growing and it fills in a few weeks. So, but it'll kill it dead. It'll kill it dead.
The number one thing you can do to prevent weeds is have healthy turf.
That's right. Keep it fertilized, keep it watered. Don't go in and scalp it in the summertime to allow that light to get into that canopy or that soil where those weeds are. Healthy turf, a good fast-growing turf is going to fight off most anything. So yeah, you are correct.
They're kind of opportunist. If there's a nice blank open spot, that'll be a nice home. But if there aren't any of those,
yeah, if it's shaded out, if it's shaded from that thick carpet, it's not going to have as many weeds. It's going to be a real obvious. Or you've got a poor area that's not growing very well. That area is going to support weeds more than it is turf. Right. So
I know that in my yard, underneath the trees where the grass doesn't grow so great. The weeds love it.
They love it. They pop in and do it.
Maybe even some henbit might show up.
Never know. You never know. But yeah, grassy weeds is one of our more challenging weeds that we've got to mainly because we don't have a chemical to selectively take them out. That works well.
That one and that
That's
one.
correct.
That one.
That's correct. But there's a bunch of them in this category, and patience, pre-emergence, healthy lawn, all the above to help us. Yep.
All right. Good tips.
Yep.
We got another question here. This one comes from Robin. She says, I have what appears to be stink bugs on my tomato plant. So I've never seen these before. What do I do? Well, those aren't stink bugs, are they?
They're not. Those are, the best we can tell are leaf-footed bugs.
Leaf-footed bugs, right?
Lots of different insects out there. Tomatoes, we kind of joke around here. It's job security for us. Right. There's always going to be something going on with our tomatoes. But we're getting a lot of questions on tomatoes. But back on specific tomatoes and the leaf-footed bugs. Right. This particular one is adults. Just like anything else, weeds or insects are harder to control as they get older and as they mature. Right. So the tougher they get, the older they get, the tougher they get, essentially. So these aren't stink bugs. These are feeding. These are feeding on kind of a similar pattern to what stink bugs do feed on. Right. Or plant bugs or squash bugs. They're going to have piercing, sucking mouth parts. They're going to pierce in. They're going to suck juices and go on. But for any of us that have gardened before, know that bugs are pretty difficult. Bugs, and I'm saying this class of bugs, right. Whether it's squash bugs, stink bugs, they're hard to control. So there's not a real good product out there that we can spray and walk away. So if we do kind of our homework. Figure out what we're dealing with, get it identified, whether they call in or do some internet searches, but figure out what we're dealing with and then figure out the plan of attack. Earlier in the season, the better, but a lot of the times we won't notice until they get to this size.
Right. So, but the nymphs, when they're smaller, and these are not pictures of nymphs, insecticidal soap, I think, can work pretty well on the smaller ones, right?
Yeah, because they haven't really got that hard shell that that chemical will really penetrate. Or whether it's a traditional chemical or an organic chemical, that neem oil can get into that skin a little easier than that hard shell.
And the neem oil, I think, would maybe have a little bit of smothering as well to show. To eliminate them, but just for comparison, there's a squash bug.
Yeah, squash bug, plant bug, anything like that.
And similar, it's easy to see why the confusion was made, but on these leaf-footed bugs, they call them leaf-footed bugs because you can see these hind legs here they get kind of expand or flat, and that's the name leaf-footed bug.
That's it, and there's quite a few that you'll see,
Right.
and they're easy to mistake. And most all bugs are going to feed a little bit on aphids or
Right.
on other soft-bodied worms or insects, so they're not all bad. Squash bugs, I don't know if I'd say that, but other bugs, you get assassin bugs or wheel bugs. Different categories in this same class, and they're going to be beneficials too.
Right.
So just kind of figure out what you got, then plan the attack essentially. And there may not be, hand picking may be the only option.
Right.
So that's kind of my advice on those. We picked a good one the first podcast because squash bugs and other stink bugs are almost impossible to control, especially if they get to that size.
Right. Well, you mentioned hand picking. I'm always amazed. People are like, what's something I can do to take care of this, a really natural way that I can get rid of these bugs? It's like, well, either barehanded or with some gloves, you can go out there and pick them off. Or just something like that maybe there's a branch that you've got this infestation. You can cut off that branch, problem solved. So sometimes there's maybe a little bit of manual labor, and we don't necessarily think that right off the bat. We're looking, what can I spray or
That's
to
right.
do this,
That's
but you
right.
don't necessarily have to spray it with anything.
And I'm just as guilty as others. And I kind of did that on a few nutsedge that I had a couple weeks ago. I had a big pile of it kind of in our front yard, and I didn't want to mix up a whole deal of spray, so I just went out and popped it. It pulled them out of the ground.
Right.
It took me 10 or 15 minutes, but it would have took me an hour to kind of get everything ready, the sprayer ready, and everything to spray it. When I could just go out and pop them off. So I've got to take my advice a little more than what I do as well. But again, and you're not going to be able to get them all, so pick until you get tired that evening and then go back and pick again that next morning. And,
Right.
There's also going to be some eggs underneath. There's some different things. Those eggs you can squish or just cut that leaf off, throw them away, and that'll help slow it down. So you do have to go in and kind of scout a little bit, but if we get to this size and these type of insects and bugs, it's going to be hard for a chemical to control them.
Right.
So yep, good question though. Keep those coming.
Yes, great questions. Email them. We'll flash up the email at the end of the podcast here, but who knows? You may see your question on the podcast.
You never know.
And there's no prizes.
You never know. You never know.
So next we got this section we're calling Coming Up. What's coming up here for us here in Tulsa or around the area? We've got our Lunch and Learns. And if you're in the Tulsa area, these are great. We have them down at the Tulsa County Library. Lunchtime about 12:10 to 12:50. Master Gardener will teach one of the classes. They call them Lunch and Learn, so you can bring your lunch down there, eat your lunch, and learn something. A variety of topics. September 17th is the first one. The Lunch and Learn is going to be like trees, how to plant trees, how do you select the trees, planting and care for those trees. Then September 24th, we got xeriscaping, which I
Kind of
said,
interesting. Xeriscaping, yeah.
Which is, do you want to tell them what that is?
It's kind of a very minimal use of water. Once the plants are established, you pick and select plants that can handle. So whether it's cactus, succulents, yucca type plants, there's a lot of different xeriscape plants that are there. Not necessarily native plants, but plants that don't require a lot of water after they get established. So yeah, cool subject. It'll be fun.
That's a good topic. Then after that, the next week, the green waste and recycling. They're going to go into the Tulsa recycling program, how that works, what it's good for, what it's not good for, explain that. And then the last one, I'm talking about succulents. Succulents have really been gaining popularity, haven't they?
It's kind of a fun thing. I mean, we're getting newer and newer releases out there of different cactus and succulents. So
Right.
I mean, I'm going to have a garden. I'm going to have a succulent garden eventually. But there's lots of different types and colors and shapes. Whether they survive the winter or not, that's kind of going to be our challenge.
Right.
Or keeping the water hose off of them.
Right.
That's going to be another challenge. But
or a completely separate class of those that are indoor. So like if you're in an apartment or something, you say, well, I can't garden, I can't do that. Well, I don't have time. You can get a succulent. They're pretty low maintenance. They look kind of cool, and you can keep it indoors.
Yeah, it'll be a fun topic.
So anyway, 4 different classes, 4 different topics. We'll post a link at the end on our website. But if you can join us, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, it's been a fun class. We're on our 4th year on it. That new library downtown in Tulsa is awesome. and they've got a lot of technology, and we'll get 50 to 80 people that show up, during lunchtime, and we'll get in there and get it talked about and get you back to work, because everybody wants to go back to work. I know.
We should call it Lunch and Learn.
Lunch and Learn. Hey, that's a great idea.
That's a good idea. Okay. Next up, we're calling this Believe It or Not. And basically, because we mentioned about somebody bringing in a snake in a bucket, but you can imagine some crazy questions come in the door, and sometimes it's hard to keep a straight face, and sometimes you just shake your head, and then the other times it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck was that? But anyway, I mean, you've got one that was here recently.
Yeah, you never know what we're going to get, and people are very smart. Did I say that right? People are smart. But no, it's one of those that, if you're not into gardening, you don't always know. But we got a call a couple weeks ago, and this lady spent a lot of time on a pollinator garden.
Right.
Very
pollinators.
Popular topics. Right. Very great to bring butterflies in, bring bees in, and things like that. And she was pretty proud of it. But one of the reasons she called in is because there was some worms that were eating her plants. She couldn't figure that out.
Right.
She couldn't figure out what those worms were. So
this is a pollinator garden.
It's a pollinator garden.
Right.
So you're trying to attract butterflies, but the butterflies, their larvae are worms.
Right.
So you're trying to attract those worms to feed on those plants so you can grow.
Those caterpillars, right?
Caterpillars. So trying to grow the butterflies. So we kind of politely just kind of said, well, those are good if you're doing pollinator and trying to attract, butterflies and things. They're going to feed on those plants. You're actually going to select plants for that pollinator garden to attract those larvae, to attract those caterpillars.
Right. Well, a lot of times we'll, possibly like dill or some of the plants like that we'll just eat milkweed, of course for the monarchs, milkweed, but you're planting those and basically as food for the caterpillars. They're not going to be here. If you're successful at attracting pollinators to your garden and they actually lay some eggs and then the caterpillars are going to devour those. So if you have caterpillars eating your stuff in your pollinator garden, good job.
It's not a bad thing.
That's what we want to do. You're kind of growing food and you bring them there. If you invite them for dinner, you might as well feed them.
Might as well feed them. And who would have guessed 10 years ago that we're going to be growing these caterpillar cats and these growing caterpillars to produce butterflies? Hey, it's great. It gets more people into gardening.
Right.
It's a fun, and it's fun. I mean, I love seeing a little kid looking at a flower and then a butterfly lands on them. I mean, look at their face. They love it. They love it. So, pretty neat deal. This will be a fun section that we'll get into a little more in each podcast.
Right.
And we'll bring some photos in, and we get some crazy questions that come in. They are you never know what you're going to get in here at the extension office.
That's right. Well, this concludes our first podcast. We did it. I think we did an okay job. We'll do this on a schedule that we'll determine later.
Yeah, we'll determine later. It just depends how much editing and all that we have to do. But no, I was happy with it, Tom. I think it turned out good, and I hope everybody else liked it as well.
Yeah. So part of this is it's not just us telling you things. This is communication. This podcast, if you're looking at it on our website, we'll have a link. If you go to our main web page, there'll be a link that says podcast. You click on that, and you'll be able to where the podcast resides, but we'll also have a bunch of links that you can click on with information about what we talked about the pre-emergents and the plants or the weeds, et cetera, et cetera. So you can learn more about it. And also, we'll have links, I won't tell you now, we'll just post them, but like our phone number, you can call and ask questions, the email address to email to the Master Gardener office here, and send us your stuff, and we'll do our best to answer or cover it as a topic, or who knows, maybe we'll make a whole show about it.
That's right. I mean, there's lots of different ways to get your questions asked. Whether Facebook, social media, we've got that going. Phone calls, you can bring it in if you're around. And again, we haven't mentioned, but if you're not from the Tulsa area, we've got extension offices in every county.
That's right.
And so, I mean, if you're having a problem and you're in a smaller town, not close to Tulsa, then take it to your extension office. They have the same resources that we do here.
Right.
It's just they can send them to campus and get them identified, or email, phone, whatever. There's a lot of ways you can get your questions answered.
And to find those you can Google search extension Rogers County or whatever county.
Yep.
Or you could always call us, and we've got a directory.
That's right.
We can give you the number and who the contact person is for your particular county. So
That's
we're
right.
just here in Tulsa County. We're kind of serving our area, but the OSU Extension serves the entire state,
That's correct.
of
That's
which
correct.
we're part of. So
That's correct.
Anyway,
Awesome.
thanks for playing. We're glad you were here, and thank you, Brian.
Good job, Tom.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.